So when we start off a project, what we like to do, particularly on a new project with a new team, is to build that team. And we have quite a number of techniques for doing that. What have you found, Paul, that's worked well for you recently?
Well, it's interesting. I work with a fairly... I actually work with a team that's fairly long running, so they're quite experienced. And so I was going to put that question back to you, actually, because I think you've had some experience very recently with a new team.
Yeah, I have actually with a new team, and I think that what I wanted to do from the beginning was to start with the retro and make sure that in the retro people were being courageous and speaking up and contributing, because I think that actually does build trust within the team. If people feel they can speak openly during the retro, it really helps for becoming a team. The other thing we do is more social aspects, for example, meeting for lunch or going for some drinks in the evening or something like that. And that's nice to meet in a social setting and perhaps learn a bit more about each other's lives outside of work and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there's also, there's other things we can do in the work day. For example, when we're first kicking off a project, things like the journey lines that we mentioned in the show last week.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great...
It's really fun. It's a really fast way to find out quite a bit about the person.
And I often find with new teams, there's two aspects to the coaching that you can give that team. You're teaching the team as a whole how to work with the Scrum framework, but you're also coaching the individuals within the team, because often you find individuals, some are more forthcoming than others, so you have to talk to the individual and try and, it's a lot about asking the right questions and bringing them out of themselves to engage with the rest of the team. For example, if they're silent at retrospectives or they're very quiet at
so how would you tackle that? I mean, if someone didn't contribute anything in a retrospective, maybe they put one post-it note on but didn't actually speak, would you take them aside afterwards, or how do you encourage them?
It's a real sweet spot. It's a real where you don't trying not to make people, if they're already nervous around certain aspects of being the transparency, then you don't want to confront them about it. So
it can be very confrontational to sort of speak to someone else and say, hey, you didn't say anything, right?
So the real thing is getting the question right for them when you do ask them, how are you feeling about that, or how was the stand up, what did you think?
So to rather than being challenging, to be a bit more probing,
rather than asking them questions maybe that are directly related to them and how they felt, maybe how was the stand up, what did you think? That kind of thing. I don't know. It's a real fine line between not pushing a already nervous person further back into their shell.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've experienced that often on a Scrum team. I know that most of our people are fairly used to working in this way. And the new team I'm working with recently, the guys are used to working in an Agile way and familiar with what you do during retros, so I haven't found it to be an issue.
I mean, I've had an experience with a team member who didn't like turning up for stand-ups, for example, and for some bizarre reason he was actually sending somebody else to the stand-up. A proxy. He wasn't actually doing work, and so I had to take. We solved that by just having we actually had a group training session around Scrum and why Scrum worked and what the and I emphasised how important the stand-ups were, but I didn't direct it right at the individual. I actually coached the team,
which is a good way of dealing with it. I mean, it's not bad for the team to be reminded, regardless of whether they're attending that stand-up or not.
That's right.
Is it? I mean, that's the other thing I've been conscious of in working with a new team, is to make sure that we are following the Scrum quite closely. I think if you start that in the beginning, then people get used to it and things just run a lot smoother. So making sure, like you say, that the stand-ups are attended, that people are not bringing in stories when they haven't finished all the stories on the board. Lots and lots of different things that come up. It does make you sound a bit sort of pedantic, but I think if you do that early on, then hopefully things will just run smoothly for the rest of the project, and you can just remind people occasionally. That's
right. And in terms of strategies for coaching, I think you are very much hands-on in terms of, I think a new team takes the Scrum Master's time in a much more basic way. It's basically reiterating the rules, the very simple rules to them, and then as the team progresses, you start to you change, you adapt your style of coaching.
It's lighter touch, really, isn't it?
That's
later
right.
on, you don't have to remind people of how sprint planning goes, and they tend to do for example, when you're planning poker to do estimation, they'll do their own countdowns to put the cards down and things like that. And really, you can just sort of sit back and watch and let them get on with it. Which is nice.
I think Lisa Adkins describes it in her book, Coaching Agile Teams, as light touch being remembering first and foremost that it's their meeting and not your meeting.
So not trying to control aspects of that meeting. And to let them. And there is a fine line, though. When teams are looking at planning and things like that, and they're talking about a particular story, sometimes there's a point where they've been talking about for quite some time. They're actually going into the solution, which to me is part of the work of the story. So it can be difficult to know when to step in and say we need to move on.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a real fine line, isn't it?
In stand-up, so you think?
I know. I'm thinking of in sprint planning, when you are tasking a story, and you might be finished tasking it, and the team is still talking about how they're going to complete that work. Now, to me, that's when you need to move on, because actually the talking about the solution and devising the solution is part of the work of the story. And that should really be done when you pick up that story, not in sprint planning. That's right. I mean, it's good to have an idea, but not to let it go too far, I think.
I think that's when a coach or a scrum master really needs to be able to read a room, and that's when you can read the room. You can pick up the team mood. If there are people sitting there going, "Oh God, this is dragging on," then cut it and move on. And it is very much people management and people understanding the individuals within the team.
and knowing the right point to say that. Because if you do say it at the wrong point, it is going to put the mood of the room off, isn't it?
That's right.
So, and you really do want these meetings to be as productive as possible, right?
Absolutely. So what are the strategies? I think we like to play games a lot. We have Scrum activities, as we call them, or games.
Games is fine, I think.
And so we thought we'd talk about the games that we play. So there are games that we play, for example, in our Intro to Scrum workshop that we run on Friday afternoons, which really emphasise key points of Scrum. For example, the rope game is a good example. It shows, or it demonstrates the concept of self-organisation for the team. So it's played in 2 rounds. The first round is with a project manager telling the team how to untangle themselves from the ropes. The second round is played by the team themselves, just untangling themselves. And the results we get, relentless results that we get, are that the team is much better at organising themselves than being told what to do.
It's a great demonstration of why the team are the best people to decide how to do the work. We're going to do a short blog post about the rope game by the end of this week, and put up a video we made of the game in action if anyone's interested, and we'll post that link on the board page after we've done that for you. But one of the things that we do, we read a lot of books around here, and one that we've used for looking at games is called Game Storming. This book goes through quite a number of chapters on how to devise games. Making your own games for particular purposes. It also includes quite a lot of games that they've put in there for you to use yourself for different purposes. Quite a lot of them are for it's called game storming, but for brainstorming on product innovation. It's really useful, and we do like to try and make our own games, quite often from starting off with someone else's game and then perhaps tweaking it to work for us.
That's right.
Not all of them work straight off, just reading them. So there's another resource that we use. Do you want to tell them about Tasty Cupcakes?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we are such fans of playing games with people to demonstrate concepts that we have scoured the internet, and Tasty Cupcakes is a fine example of a really good website. They've got a number of games on there for different purposes, and some of them really, there's one that I use, for example, when I'm coaching test-driven development, which is called the Balloon game, and it really demonstrates the power of having a test harness. It's Agile coaches and Scrum Masters sharing their their games with you on Tasty Cupcakes. It's an awesome resource.
So is that tastycupcakes.org?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a title for that, unfortunately, but we will post it after on the summary that we put up. I just read some messages here. Apparently our sound wasn't working recently, but it's working now, so that's good news.
That's good
news. Not much use without it. And for Petty, the topic today is teams and team building and how we do that and team coaching.
That's right.
We'll obviously put a summary up afterwards as well.
So do you have any examples of other good games that we play, Kirsten?
Yeah, I mean there's that. There's one that we're probably going to be doing in some training this afternoon called the Tube game. It's probably quite hard for me to describe succinctly, but we might put a description up on the blog along with the rope game. It's basically a game where you run through a couple of different sprints with retrospectives in between so that the team can inspect and adapt and improve on their processes.
Yeah.
The main thrust of it is that you have a bicycle tube and you have to see how many times you can get the entire team through that bicycle tube, so they have to pass through it. So it's quite a physical game. It's quite fun, particularly if you're doing a long session. So, if you break sort of an hour and a half in and do that game, it really keeps their energy up. And, then when everyone sits down again, they're all sort of buzzing. So it works really nicely. And it demonstrates the usefulness of retrospectives and the inspect and adapt cycle really well.
Absolutely. And as an example, I adapted that game recently and tried it with my team that have been running for a long time. And we were I tried to focus it on them so that we kind of describe it as what's your team kind of, and so we used a tube game, and it was a way of team building that team to make them focus on themselves or the individuals within the team, if you know what I mean. So what we did was we set up an element of danger with the tube game. I gave them a piece of paper, like a waiver agreement, and they were going to sign for me saying that I took no.
How did that work out for you?
It didn't work too well. New Zealanders aren't, they're not that worried about workplace safety.
It's funny because they couldn't really understand why they're being asked to do it, and then some of them were reluctant to sign something, which I thought was very suspicious of them. But
the answer was we have the Accident Compensation Corporation for these things. We don't need to sign a waiver. No one's going to sue us. We're not going to sue you. Don't worry about it. We won't.
I think this is the interesting thing about playing games. You never know how it's going to go down until you start playing them, and every single group is different. We run workshops most weeks, and we play games in each one of them. And I think every single game is slightly different according to the personalities in there.
Yeah.
But we do find they're great for demonstrating the concepts. But it's interesting to see the variations that you get.
The other adaptation with that game I said before we started playing was that there was actually a team in England that had done this in less than 1 second. They'd managed to get their whole team through the tube in less than 1 second.
Do you know how they did that? Or?
Yeah, I do know how they did that.
Is that a secret?
It's not a secret, but obviously I don't want to divulge that on public.
No, because that'll ruin the game for people.
That's right.
So what about some other games? Is there any other ones we've used recently?
Team building wise, I really like the Marshmallow Tower or the
yeah, that's quite a popular one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a TED Talk. TED Talks are also another good resource for Agile related discussions. Mm-hmm. But TED Talks, so the Marshmallow Challenge, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. And the object of the game is to build a tower using 20. You've got 20 pieces of spaghetti. Dry spaghetti.
I was going to say, is that cooked or?
Dry spaghetti and tape, and then the crowning moment is that you have to have a marshmallow right on the top of the tower.
That's what makes it quite tricky, isn't it, with that weight on the top?
Yeah, and the tallest tower wins the game. 18 minutes to build a tower. It's a fantastic team building game.
Yeah, it was interesting. I watched it last time. There was varying degrees of success.
Yes, and lots of constructive argument, I think.
Yes. There was certainly. I mean, obviously our teams they don't hold back on these sorts of activities, do they?
But that's going back to the Scrum team. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really healthy state for a Scrum team to be in. Constructive argument, or
constructive dissent. I think
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Constructive disagreement, whatever you want to call it. It's a case of them questioning each other and questioning the solution they found.
Yeah, I mean, it means they're constantly challenging themselves to find the best solution.
That's right. And then, of course, like you say, they're also improving their quality and improving their practices through that mechanism as well.
Okay. Have we got anything else to say about teams today?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm at an interesting journey, place in my journey, because my team is, I'm definitely using the light touch to coach.
Yeah, team. Because there's such a well-established team, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's something quite fun about working with a new team and sort of discovering new personalities and what works with each personality.
That's right.
I think as the coach, that's the interesting bit, because the same approach doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. I know we don't often have two books, but I did bring this book along because I like it so much. It's Coaching Agile Teams by Lisa Adkins, and Lisa bases her. I think the basis for this book is what's known as coactive coaching, which is where you treat each individual as capable and resourceful and able to do their jobs, and the answers are within that person, and you as a coach pull those answers from them, not tell them what to do, not give them solutions, because it's the whole kind of teach a man how to fish. He can fish for his life, just give him a fish, he's going to be fed for the day. That kind of, you're trying to do that with your teams. You're trying to teach the individual how to find the answers.
And I think that once you accept that premise that people are resourceful and will find their own solutions, people can really surprise you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes this job really fun. I think that people continually surprise you in a good way.
Absolutely.
So. Okay, well I think we're going to wrap up for today. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Paul.